What is going on, traders? Happy Wednesday. I hope you guys all had an amazing day. But as you guys can just see from looking at the chart, the market was absolutely booming today, right? So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know exactly how my day trading went. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. And as you guys can see from the screen, it was a green day overall for my account. And in terms of how I did day trading wise, I only traded TQQQ today. I didn't touch SQs at all. And as you guys can see, I was up $120, right? So I do use $10,000 to trade. And I have a daily goal of 1% or $100, right? So I was able to exceed that daily goal today. And I'm super blessed for that. But I'm going to go ahead and explain to you guys exactly how I was able to profit on the day, right? And why I only focused on TQs. But these are my filled orders you guys can see when I was buying and selling everything, right? And so let's go ahead and look at the chart and, let me go ahead and explain why, I was focused on TQs. But as far as what I saw, going on long term wise, although we have been selling off the past, few days, right? I knew that long term we have been very bullish, right? And I need to respect that, consistent direction and uptrend, right? So any single time we do experience these price corrections where we break below the EMA, right? What ends up happening? It doesn't, break below for too long, and it ends up ending. So we don't end up breaking below for too long, right? And we eventually end up recovering, right? And so I did notice that pattern, right? And even looking at the past 20 days, it's easier to see that anytime we do have a pullback, right, we do end up trying to form a new high, right, and have a strong uptrend pattern. And so although we did pull back the past day or two, right, I needed to be real with myself that direction has still been uptrending, right, in the long term on the larger time frames, right? So it made sense to me why there was more margin potentially for TQs to have today, right, rather than SQs to keep selling off, right? I'm not saying it wasn't a possibility that this thing could keep selling off, right? Anything can happen, but to me it just made sense why I would focus my attention on TQQQ. And so what actually ended up happening is at market open, we saw it start to pick up a bit, right? I got in with a quarter position size, but we immediately got rejected, formed a new low. I actually cut that trade there, right? And once I did see it start to finally pick up in reverse with some nice, momentum, I bought back in. I averaged up, and then I cut majority of my trade up here. And the reason for that was I saw where, right, during the pre-market session at least, it was acting as a resistance level, this general area, right? So it made sense to me that as we were approaching this area, we could experience a form of resistance. So that's why I did my part in cutting majority of my position there, right? We ended up pulling on back, and this is where I actually decided to buy back in with another quarter. So I cut majority of my trade here. I was up about $50 on the day, and I did leave a quarter to run, right? And once it did pull on back and I saw it start to bounce, I actually added another quarter here, right? As you guys can see, right? My first trade I sold for a loss, as I mentioned. Then I bought, sold, right, for a majority for that $50 profit. And then I bought another quarter, right? I left a quarter running and I bought another quarter at 640, as you guys can see, right? As we pulled on back to the EMA. And as it started to push up, right, things were looking good, but we immediately started to actually sell off when we got rejected by that previous pre-market resistance, right? And once we did break below the EMA, we started to aggressively sell off from there. But I actually bought another quarter, not here, right, when I saw it bounce. But once we tested that support again and I saw it start to bounce, I bought back in with another quarter, as you guys can see, around 653, right, which is right around this time frame here. And so once I did buy back in with another quarter, I'm in with about 75% position size here. We end up pushing up, and what ends up happening, we actually make a new low on the day. And so once we did form this new low on the day and start to form a support here, this is where I sent my last entry here. So I was back in, right, fully averaged in, and by this point I had given up, pretty much all the profit that I made on this trade up here. And so we did, start to bounce, right? You guys can see I ended up averaging up at 705, right around this area. And so we did start to bounce, and it was going my way, but what ended up happening, well, this thing continued to make new lows on the day, right? So by this point, right, by the time we actually ended up selling off down here, I was down about $115, $120 on the day, right? But we eventually ended up finding the support that I thought we would, right? And as I mentioned, what made me think there would be a support, every time we had these price corrections, we would end up pushing back up, right? We would have these aggressive sell-off, and then we would eventually end up trying to pick back up, right? And so we were selling off very aggressively the past 2 days. It made sense to me why we could form a support around this area. I wasn't sure exactly where it was going to be, right? That's why I ended up getting burned on the way down. But eventually in the later half of the day, we did end up starting to form higher highs and higher lows, right? And I cut majority of my trade right around this area actually, right? So I missed out on a lot of that margin that was made there. But I'm not a perfect trader, and I can definitely do my part in not getting so emotional to cut a trade, right? And letting that momentum really run, right? Or at least cut, majority and let the rest run, which is what I actually ended up doing, I think. But yeah, that's how I was able to profit $120 on TQs. As you guys can see, we started to pull on back, and boom, right? We absolutely rocketed another, what is this, 1.8% on the NASDAQ future, right? So that was cool to see. And the reason for that is NVIDIA, right? NVDA, they actually reported earnings, right? And they ended up shooting from a price of around 304 to almost $400. So nearly a 25% increase, right? So that's what was actually driving, the NASDAQ up after market hours. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to discuss in today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning back in. I will be posting a recap tomorrow, so I hope to see you guys then. Take care and have a good rest of your day.